Hi, intuitive viewers. Welcome, welcome. I'm excited today because I have a very exciting guest for you. I want to introduce you to Felice. She is a teacher of yoga and meditation. She is a Reiki and intuitive healer, and she's also a channeler. And she is here to talk to us today about a very interesting experience that she had. But first, I want to welcome you, Felice. Hello.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone.
Welcome to the channel. And I want to thank Donna too, because she kind of put us together.
Yes,
I just
yes.
thought we'd be a good fit. So thank you to Donna for doing that. I really appreciate it. So Felice, to start your story, because it's so fascinating. I mean, it's such a fascinating story, and I think so relatable to so many people because we're going to kind of go back to before 2012. And you describe your life as like, I'm living, I think of myself as a mom and a teacher, and I you kind of identify myself in with my personality and what I believe and who I am, and then you kind of move into between 2012 and 2014 what you call resiliency boot camp. So tell us what happened in those 2 years.
So in 2012, well, first I want to start by saying, up until that point, I was I was open to spirituality. I was on a spiritual path, and I was also living a very, I was a mom.
Mhm.
I was a teacher in a Montessori school. I was building up my career there. I had been there for 20 years. I skied. I identified as a yogi. I was super active on my bike. And what happened in 2012 is the reason I call it resiliency boot camp, and I'll share all the incidences, is up until that point, I didn't have any what I considered at the time as major trauma in my life. I was blessed with a very supportive family and a loving community and all of those things. And what I've come to realize is that we all have micro traumas that we don't register as traumas, even if they're not the big, it doesn't seem like a wham. Oftentimes that goes into the subconscious mind. That's a whole nother tangent. So in 2012, I became an empty nester. So my identity as a mom shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my jewelry got stolen. There was a big theft in my house. So all the jewelry from when I was a child that was handed down to me from family, all of that had gone. So any of the outer material things,
Right.
and I had nice jewelry, right? That was gone. My house had a fire. So there was that. And I was displaced. And within that time, when I moved back into the house, there was a huge flood. So the upstairs of the house was demolished. And then with the flood, the downstairs of the house was demolished. So I was displaced again.
Gosh. Oh my gosh.
And I was also a skier. I fell skiing, and I had to have surgery on my knee a month after I fell. Amidst all of that, my partner at the beginning of all this had an affair, my partner at the time.
Oh gosh.
And the infidelity and the affair, out of all the things that happened, that emotional turmoil and that inner sense of, almost when you put your stability in another human being or your relationship with another human being. So that was like the foundation that rocked my world, kind of. And then all of the other stuff that defined me, right? So as a mom, as a partner, I took a leave of absence from work. So I wasn't teaching. I wasn't a homeowner. I mean, I was a homeowner, but I wasn't living in my home. Again, all of that outer stuff. And it just, this whole sense of identity, I was really forced to look at that place inside.
Right.
And even though I knew, and I always felt like I was connected to a place inside, it really shattered what I thought I knew about myself, because still all that outer stuff defined me.
Of course.
And through various modalities and therapy, and I went on some antidepressants at the time. And through Western medicine and Eastern acupuncture, and I mean, every kind of alternative therapy, through all of these different tapping into this inner resources and gratitude practices, through all of it, I kept on hanging on to this fact of, if my experiences in getting knocked down could help just one person, it was for something greater than myself. Like, that's what really kept me through.
Right.
And then just as I started to get back on my feet again, I was at Montessori, and at that time I knew when I went back, I wanted to do something either with all that I had just been through and help others who were navigating change and loss after finding my way back to my sense of self.
Right.
Or I wanted to expand upon what I was doing in the world of education and Montessori. I started speaking at events and conferences, and I was consulting. And the thing that I really wanted to do was the prior, like, use the experiences as this human being having a human experience, and how to navigate your sense of identity amidst change and chaos, and when things fall apart like that. And I wasn't doing any of it. I was just kind of did nothing. And so about a year and a half, almost 2 years after all the onslaught of all that stuff started to happen, I was leaving work one day. I was walking to my car. I crossed the street. I was at a light. It's a major intersection where I live near school. And the light turned red. And I looked both ways. The cars had stopped. And I proceeded to cross this street. And a big pickup truck came up from behind me, up the street, and so I never saw it coming, and made a left-hand turn.
Oh my gosh.
And hit me on my right side and propelled me about 30 feet from the crosswalk. And I don't know if it was at that point that I left my body or when I hit the ground. I had sustained multiple fractures on my right side and my pelvis and my sacrum. I ended up having staples in my head and a mild traumatic brain injury and a lot of internal bleeding and swelling and everything that would happen when you get hit by a big, however many ton pickup truck. And I left my body, and I had a very significant near-death experience where I was looking down and I saw the whole scene. And then I was elsewhere, and there were messages and another presence that I connected in within a whole nother realm. So that's the short version. And then coming back. Yeah.
No. And I because I kind of want to go step by step with this NDE.
Yeah.
Because when people talk about near-death experiences, NDEs, I always have so many questions. So I need to ask you all these questions that I have. And so I kind of want to go step by step, because so you get hit and then you're like, and then I'm outside my body. Was there a pulling? Was there a feeling, or were you just there? You're just outside of your body looking at yourself.
So what I could tell you, and sometimes I end up closing my eyes because I really I never want to tell the story from rote, like
right.
I mean, to really be in that moment.
Right.
So what happened was I was hit. The last thing, and this came to me a few months later when someone said, oh, they were telling me what they saw, and they said, that was you? I thought you were dead, lying in the road like that. And and they said something about the truck that was there. And at that moment, and again, this was a few months later, I remember remembering whipping my head around and making eye contact and having this periphery of a truck, being like because it's with a big truck, that's where it
Right.
was. And then, so I remember that for a split second, and then I was out of my body. And I was out of my body. There wasn't a pulling.
Okay.
It's like I was ejected
Right.
from
Right.
my body. And there was a period of assessing the scene below me. And I watched what happened. I watched the woman who hit me. I heard and I saw, but with faculties other than seeing and hearing, because that was impossible. I was lying.
Right.
It was right. So I saw everything, and the scene faded, and then I was somewhere else. And I don't know whether I traveled that somewhere else or if it emerged out of this vastness. I was somewhere else.
And when you're above your body like that and you see it, was there fear? Did you say to yourself, oh, I'm dead? Or was it just like it just happened and you were just experiencing it?
I was just there.
Right.
And it I remember a sense of disorientation, like there was a slight sense of disorientation.
Right.
And it was almost like an assessing the scene.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, the human mind wants to make sense of things, right?
Of course. Mm-hmm.
So of course, in retrospect, I don't know if I was assessing if I was going to be able to go back or not, or if I was assessing like where am I, what happened?
Right.
And I can tell you that there's pure, imagine taking an out breath, right? There was just pure, at some point, there was pure peace, pure calm, pure expansiveness, no pain, this warmth, this holding, nothing, there was no ego. Mm-hmm. So there was nothing or rational thought. It just was. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense, but that's the experience.
It does, because you're you're just there. You're in the moment, you're present. And did you feel alone, or did you feel like supported by something or someone?
Yeah. So what happened was that it felt like I was there. Mm-hmm. I felt safe and held. Mm-hmm. And warm. It was almost like being held in a cocoon, yet expansive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after that there was a short time of assessing or of looking down upon the scene. And then when I was somewhere else, there was a presence, and I was not alone in that. I don't know if I was alone in that first place. I remember it was kind of like, it felt like kind of like a holding place, but just from And then I was somewhere else, and it was total blackness. And from that blackness and expansiveness, it was very nurturing. There was another presence other than my own that was there to help me understand, to impart information. And this presence was full of light. It was effulgent light. It was light. And I knew in some part of my knowing that that presence was communicating with the higher self, that eternal part of me, that higher self of me. And there was information that was shared at a very high rate of speed. It was like timeless. And the only way I can describe it, and I've described it this way, is if you put your head to someone else's forehead and you know everything there is to know.
Right.
It was kind of like that. And there was a lot of information that was imparted and shared and downloaded or uploaded that allowed me that allowed me to understand everything that was going on in my own circumstances on earth, and also allowed me to know, confirm really about the nature of being human and in a human body.
Mhm.
And I remember a sense of urgency of wanting to come back to utilize and apply all the information that was
Mhm.
shared with me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so when you got all of this information, do you remember the information, or you just know it was just a lot of information?
I remember the information. I mean, some of it is more of a knowing, a feeling,
Uh-huh.
and, you know, very heightened clairs. We call the clairs, right?
Yeah.
Clairvoyance, clairsentience, um, claircognizance, very heightened senses as
Mhm.
with regards to hearing and knowing and seeing. And the
Mhm.
only way I can describe it is like looking at a puzzle and knowing how all the pieces fit together and how they come
Right.
apart. If someone hands you a Rubik's Cube and you know how to put it together and they say, how'd
Right.
you do that? And you say, I don't know, I just knew. I
Right.
came back with a lot of that
Right.
as it pertains to the information.
Mhm.
And there were specific things that I clearly remember. Clearly, loud as day, heard them from a presence other than my own, and then continued to hear as I was back and integrating and healing my body and my brain, like
Mhm.
being embodied. So
And
yeah.
the person, the entity giving you all the information, did you feel like they were familiar? Did you recognize them?
Um, it felt familiar. I
Mhm.
didn't recognize them per se, but now as a like my grandmother or my grandfather, you know, I didn't recognize them in that sense. It was
Mhm.
more recognizing them as a guardian of sorts, as
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
guide. And so in that way, that presence was, excuse me, was familiar, and that knowing that they've been with me
Right.
always. Does that,
Yeah,
again,
so they
I don't know if
they
it makes
more
sense.
it more it sounds like they kind of had a you recognize their relation to you, that they were
Yeah.
related to you somehow, and they were you had some kind of connection with them,
Yes.
right?
And that in, it almost felt like when I was in that state and in that eternal place, receiving information with that, from that place, it was like this merging in that sense of that oneness, yet there was also this clear distinction
Mhm. Mhm.
of this guide and this being. And it
Right.
was interesting. I did some work with someone, and that, you know, that presence came to me again. That presence comes to me now
Oh,
as a
uh-huh.
guide, so I know that
Uh-huh.
that's
That's
there.
what it is.
Yeah. So
And so when you and a lot of people when they have NDEs, they talk about not wanting to come back, but you felt like I need to come back. There's stuff I need to do.
yeah, there was an urgency to get back
Okay.
to impart. And I don't know, you know, it's something, again, the mind wants to make sense of things.
Right, of course.
And so, of course, in my mind, the story my brain wants to tell is that perhaps it was that it, it wasn't my time. And perhaps if I stayed, I would have gone through the tunnel and seen the tunnel and gone towards
Mhm.
that. And maybe that was the next step.
Right.
Because when I was at a graveside funeral, and the rabbi that had spoke of the person. It was 2 years after my experience, and he spoke
Mhm.
about the person and their soul, and everything he said gave words to my experience. And I said to him after, I, the way that you described it for me was so spot on in my own experience. And I told him what happened, and he said, come tell me more about it. So I told him what happened, and he said, how you describe it is that um, you were like, he in the Kabbalah, that's called the whatever it's called, I don't know the terms, you
Right.
were here And right. So it's like you were here, and then the place you go when you don't return is here, or the light might be here. It's like just on
Right.
that edges of not coming back. So
Right.
who knows? That's just my mind.
Right.
But
And it doesn't sound like you had a lot of visuals. It was more feelings and that kind of thing. Because some people talk about, like you said, a light, seeing colors, seeing all these things, but yours was more a, a feeling experience, or and a kind of knowing, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Do you
there was
remember any visuals at all?
I do. I remember, I do remember. And again, the senses, it's not like eyesight, like we know
Right.
eyesight or
Right.
all of the five senses. I mean, the senses are just so expanded. So I can see and
Right.
practically touch the blackness. It was
Right.
blackness. And so I felt it and I saw it was blackness, but not
Right.
with the eyes. So I did see, and this presence I saw
Mm-hmm.
and felt and experienced this huge effulgence is the only word I can, like this, the brightest, most intense light you can imagine. I saw it
Right.
in this presence that wasn't my own, yet it was also an experience.
Uh-huh.
It's so hard to give words sometimes to these
Right.
things
Right.
because it's almost indescribable with the language we have
Right.
to use. So it was all of it. It was all of it.
Right.
It was like hearing, but hearing what was said and knowing what was said and
Right.
seeing. So it was all of the senses.
Right.
And again, I don't, however this lands for someone, it's just the only way I know how to express my experience.
Right. Well, it almost feels like language almost diminishes the experience, because it was so completely encompassing and full. And
Yes.
yeah.
And when I came back, I felt that sense of urgency to come back. I don't know if I stayed longer, if then I wouldn't have had the opportunity
Right.
to
Right.
come back. Because I
Right.
was pretty uh hurt. My physical form was pretty mangled.
Right. Right.
I remember the feeling of coming back and um hearing like voices, sort of like that were
Mm-hmm.
actually in form.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this feeling of being outside of my body and
Mm-hmm.
inside of my body. I remember feeling this density, and this
Mm-hmm.
weighted, like being squeezed into
Oh,
bottle, genie in a bottle. Yet also we extend outside of our bodies. And I
right.
remember coming back into this form, that weightedness and that density.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and also all of the new awarenesses, and when I had mentioned the infidelity, that and it had been a dance for many years, um having a totally new sense of forgiveness and compassion and
Mm-hmm.
understanding, and knowing that we all have this divine essence inside of us, and we access that in different ways. And some people might have more access to that in a conscious way,
Right.
so that we can acknowledge the essence of who someone is and also pay attention to who they're being. Which is where boundaries come in, because how do you live as a spiritual being in a human body and a human being in a human body, right?
Right.
It's being in
Right.
the both end. And we can acknowledge that essence and that light and that source and that divine love that someone truly is.
Right.
And again, pay attention to who they're being,
Right. Right.
right? Like we can do both things. So
Right.
the deeper levels, and in this realm, there is no resentment, there's no angst, it's just everything is clear. Like,
Right.
oh, you just get it all. It all makes sense. What's happening on Earth and how our
Right.
souls are here to grow and learn and evolve. So,
And what do you think that the earthly time frame of your experience was? Do you think it was a couple minutes, an hour? What do you think it was?
you know, I can't remember. I the earthly, again, time.
Right. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, linear time is such a man-made thing.
Yeah.
A few, I don't know, a few minutes. It could have been
Right.
eons. Like, I don't,
Right. Right.
I fully came to and was like in my body. I was being taken out of the ambulance. I was on a stretcher, and I was brought to a trauma center at a hospital
Mhm.
that was further from where I live, because they have a trauma center. And I, it was like organized chaos, lights, like the whole thing,
Right.
and frantic, because my head was, they didn't,
Yeah.
that was the big thing for them, was like, what,
Right.
at the time. So yeah, yeah. So
And so,
I don't know as far as the time on the ambulance report and on the hospital report.
right. Right.
I mean, it wasn't, I was not in a coma. I was, I was not in an induced coma for any period of time. I don't, yeah.
And so after you have this experience and you're going through, you're recovering, how fast was it that it really kind of shifted your life, shifted like how you were going to conduct your life from that experience on? Was it immediate, or was it kind of little by little you kind of decided, this is, I'm going to go in this other direction? Because you were teaching at the time, you were kind of just trying to get back, it sounds like, to your life before everything went chaotic, and then this happened. And then what happened after that? How did you kind of decide how to proceed from there?
Well, what happened was, I was in the hospital. I don't know, I wasn't in the, I was in the hospital, I don't know, 3 days, I think 4 days. And then I was in rehab. And then I came home, and I had visiting nurses in my house.
Mhm.
And, I couldn't walk. So there was a lot of healing in my body. I was on a walker
Right.
for a long time. Well, first I was in a wheelchair, then I was in a walker. Then everything seemed really off. And part of it was on a spiritual level, like integrating what just happened.
Right. Right.
Like, and where am I? And now I'm in this body, but I'm partly still like not all here.
Right.
And part of it was a head injury. So with a mild traumatic brain injury, I never went back to teaching in the same capacity, because of various capabilities that shift. So,
Mhm.
it's interesting. People use the word recovery as if you're going to recover to the way it used to be.
Right.
And I remember a doctor saying to me, you're going to be 100%, but your 100% is going to look different.
Mm.
And, you're like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
So it took a long time. I mean, I just recently stopped full speech therapy. And, the thing I can't not do is to share about the near-death experience. And when I came back, I was at such this high vibrational frequency and state of
Mhm.
being that what I was channeling was information from this frequency that was a match for that.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that was coming through, and there's a lot that comes through that's not even in my vocabulary, or not words I use,
Right.
right? Or
Right.
not even a language
Yeah.
that I use. So there's a lot of information that comes through. And the thing is, we all have this potential. We all have these capabilities.
Right.
It's opening up, it's tapping in and tuning into that within ourselves,
Right.
and opening to it.
Right.
So I do consults a little bit with Montessori Training Center, and
Uh-huh.
with parents that have toddlers at home, because that, is something that I did for so long. I just know it.
Right.
And the thing I can't not do really now is to use these gifts and abilities to help, comfort, support, inspire, facilitate healing in whatever way that I can be of service to someone else. And I've done many trainings to kind of hone those skills, those new amplified, enhanced abilities,
Right.
So it's still a shifting new normal, and that's why when the pandemic hit, I started to do a bunch of videos because I felt like, resiliency, shifting new normals, things being inconsistent and always changing. And
I know about this.
I know how to do this. So, and the adaptability of, the adaptability of not knowing. And now 5 years later, I've more settled in and starting to share my story now. So that's why I've just started to kind of share it and show up in a different way.
Right.
So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does. It totally does. And I guess, and I also, when you look back on this experience from before 2012 to now, do you think that, all of those kind of like the infidelity and the fire and the flooding and all of these things, do you think that those were kind of like wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, and you're not waking up, so now this big thing happens? Or do you think it was like that's what happened? Or do you feel like it was all just experiences and you needed to make something? How do you make sense of it all? If you thought about that.
Thank you so much for asking that question, because that's a really important question, right? I think there are things that I knew, but I didn't want to pay attention to what I knew that I knew, and I made other choices. And as human beings, we have free will, and I was not listening to my intuition, and I made certain choices based on my ego or based on previous beliefs about myself, whatever it was not listening to my intuition. And one thing happened, and then a cascade of things happened. And the final thing, I could see how, and that's, I could see how I co-created all of this. And people can, and so yes, I see my part in all of it. And even, I think with everything, my part in the whole infidelity thing was I always try and look at how am I accountable for something to myself, not to blame myself, because there are some things that are just not okay. Right. Yet I always try to look at my accountability, and my accountability was I was not listening to my intuition, right? Before even that point. And that's between me and me, right? And I don't blame myself. I'm like, let's get curious about that. Anytime an opportunity comes up. So I think things kept happening. And then there was that I call it dope slap by the universe. That was the hit by the truck, because I was not listening. It was like, hello. And, so I'm in the midst of writing a book, and that's the chapter, dope slap by the universe. Like, it got, right? Yes. And so I see that, and I do think we co-create our reality. And I also think we have a choice with the things that happen in our lives. Whether you're of the belief that things happen to us, things happen for us. We never want to take a victim mentality, but sometimes maybe people are the victims of a heinous crime or something. We always have the choice to use what happens in our life for ourselves. So to say, how is this for me? What can I do with this? Rather than to feel, woe is me. How can we use it for our growth and learning and expanding? And why might this be for me? Just to look at that. So, yeah.
And, and I love, I talked about Eckhart Tolle. My people on my channel are used to it. I always talk about it. But one thing he always says, because I think that's right, is that, you know, if something awful happens, look at it, not that you did this to yourself, but if I had, why would I have done this? Or why would I have made this? Why would I have made this happen to me?
Yeah.
Just like that. And I think what you do when you ask that question, or when you look at something as though, if I did have a part in this, why would I have done this to myself? What am I supposed to learn? And I think when you do that, you're inviting grace into the situation. You're inviting the divine in at that point, because if it's just, this crappy thing happened and I'm miserable and I hate my life, you can do that. And that's very human. And there is a point where we all do that when something awful happens. But when you ask that question of where's my responsibility, it does invite a different consciousness in, I think, a wiser, bigger part of us. Do you think that is true?
Absolutely. And when you just said that, I was thinking, to do it, like to approach that question, like with the grace and with self-compassion, right? And also with self-compassion, because it's so easy to spiritually bypass things, to say, oh, well, right? With compassion for self, what I'm learning a lot about is that, that opening to grace, and that question that you asked, why would I do this, right? But not in a beating ourselves up way, right?
Right.
Grace, and with the compassion and with the awareness and with curiosity, and allowing ourselves to feel grief when grief comes up. I've been working with a somatic experience therapist, and there are things we hold in our subconscious that, as human beings, right, we're biologically wired, we're physiologically wired, and we're spiritual beings and we're human beings. And for a while, I had this imposter syndrome, right? Like, well, if I know all these things and I know that all is truly well, I mean, I heard from this presence, other than my own, all is truly well. And there's a lot about that, especially given what's been going on in the world. So there's a lot to unpack and talk about there. But I, knowing what I now know from this experience, and having that knowing like solidified inside of me, and also having things come up as a human being, like that's okay, because we're all of it. We're in the both ends. And to really, because if we don't allow the grief, or we don't allow ourselves to feel what we feel, that's where I think we get really hard on ourselves and don't allow that self-compassion and that grace to look at things that are going on in our lives from a higher perspective.
Right.
And that's when just our energy could get kind of stuck. So
yeah, exactly. It can get stuck. Absolutely. It can get stuck. And so you're sharing this experience now. And I find it interesting too, that you didn't share it right away. It took you a little while to come out, I guess, as like, this happened to me.
Yeah, I did share it with my close friends and people around me. I just hadn't really shared it publicly, in part because there was so much to say, and I've so much written in so many journals, like just the organizational piece of it, the intuitive piece, great. The more expansive piece is the structuring of it, that and not wanting to occur that, oh, me, I, because it's not about that. It's just sharing of the information. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. So you were going to ask something.
No, just that you're sharing this now. And I on my channel, I talk about this shift that I was told in 2017, okay, we're going to have this, a lot of people and animals are going to be leaving the earth in big numbers. And this was something this was before a few months before the pandemic. And I was just like, that's weird. I remember it happened do you remember the Amazon fires, when the fires happened in the Amazon? It was this big message of like, so I let people know. And I said, this shift is happening, and we're going to go through this really kind of like icky unearthing of all this icky stuff happening in our country and happening, all these things happening. And then this kind of mass awakening is happening. Do you think that as well? Do you feel like people are listening to your story in a different way and kind of accepting all the things you do in a different, do you feel that kind of mass kind of shifting? I don't know if it's just like a vibrational lift or something, but something is happening. And I feel like the last few years especially has just put it in overdrive. It's just like, okay, here we go, because we've had to fix and face so many things even in the last year. I mean, there's just been so much. Do you feel that?
I have to tell you can't see right now, everyone, but my eyes are tearing. Everything that you're saying right now resonates so completely with me. And I feel as though there's this big cracking open. Absolutely. That the consciousness has shifted and spirituality is more mainstream. And people who are on the cusp of awakening or awakening to new, I mean, when I say awakening, just being open to things that maybe their minds can't wrap around. And also even science now, for people who are drawn towards, I want evidence, it's supporting spirituality. I mean, look, you have Joe Dispenza doing what Joe Dispenza, you're familiar with Joe Dispenza?
Who is Joe Dispenza?
Oh, Joe Dispenza.
I don't know.
Joe Dispenza is a teacher and a meditation. He was a chiropractor. He healed himself, and it's amazing. So he guides people through these journeys using different sound frequencies and talking. And I mean, it's wild.
Oh, wow.
And it's interesting because the language he uses is very similar. Like what's happening is very similar to what happens in Kundalini yoga, yet the expression of it is different. But the experience is the same. So it appeals to different people, right? Because he has very factual scientific data.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and Kundalini yoga does too. It's just different. The way it's presented, different people are going to resonate with the way different spiritual or just more consciousness is expressed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I completely agree with you. And it's interesting because I feel like it comes in waves. I know for me, there were so many people that I knew that were leaving the planet, or that I was hearing in my communities. I was like, wow, this person passed, and it was kind of all at the same time. And whether people's souls sign up for it before they come to Earth in like a knowing way to help usher in this new wave, or whether it's, again, human will and choice and discernment. That's a whole nother conversation too. I do absolutely feel, believe, and see and know all around us. I mean, you can feel it energetically in the collective, this massive shift and opening and awakening. And it's so interesting because I look at the younger people now that are coming in that feel so, like when I go on Instagram and I see a lot of people, I mean, I say kids, but people in their like 20s or mid 20s, early 20s, talking about these kind of things. It's like they're channeling light languages and they're tuning into sacred geometry, and it's like effortless. It's almost like there's not a lot of karma that comes in with them. And it's just, we're living in, and to witness and experience and help usher in and facilitate these amazing times. And I think the biggest thing is to I mean, I know for me, I'm really, it's walking without judgment, right? So that for me, because then other people, it feels like more open to it, but that's just in my world, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, and I think that's true. I mean, I think that's such a good point, because it's always, so it's always good to remind ourselves that we have a certain way of being able to see things or view things that not everybody's there yet. There's still there's people at different, and they'll get there. I mean, like you said, and when I've talked to other people, other intuitives that I've interviewed, or people that have these gifts, so often, including myself, they come through tragedy, or they're awakened, or they're broken open in a way through a massive change or a massive tragedy, or something that happens you weren't expecting, and then all of a sudden you're broken open.
Yep.
And I think that with the pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, it broke open a lot of people on a micro level and a macro level. Don't you think? Do you think that was part of this kind of, okay, everybody awake now?
Well, yes, and it's so interesting because so many cultures and so many traditions and so many prophecies have spoken of this,
right,
for thousands of years, and here we are.
right.
So there's also that, right? These wisdom traditions that have talked about this time, and also think about the age of Aquarius. Like, I mean, that's been that's been out there, and everyone knows.
Right, right.
And here we are, and it's actually happening. It's really wild,
Yeah.
And also, yes, the collective. There's this macro collective cracking open, and then there's the individual traumas so the collective trauma and the individual trauma that precipitates this change and this spaciousness where more light can emerge, and where more higher states of consciousness and being can emerge, because we have to do it different. It's like when you're not paying attention, just like with when you asked about all those things happening, it's like when you're not paying attention to certain things, and then the universe delivers, and then you have to pay attention.
Right.
And I think
that's it. And Felice, I would again, or having those experiences, this pandemic, that the way that it affected people individually and on this bigger macro level, it's an opportunity, right? I mean, people can pass it up because, you had all these things happen, and you're like, I want to get back to my life. I just need to get back to my life. And then the universe is like, no, you're not doing that. You're doing something else. Right. But it's an opportunity, right? I mean, this is an opportunity to look at our lives, to change them in a way that makes more sense, or to be, whatever it is, less selfish or more in tune with nature, or whatever it is. This is an opportunity, but it's not necessarily one that everybody's going to take. Some people are just going to be like, I just want to get back to my job, and I just want to get back to what I was before. So we'll have some of that, but we do have this shifting that's happening that's undeniable.
Yeah, it feels, there's reassessing. I mean, people who are maybe not considering things outside of their homes and their families and the material, whatever it is, where there's this reconsidering things, I think, or reconsidering priorities, or what's important, or connecting with family in a different way, or whatever it is for people. At whatever level, it feels to me that there has been some reconsidering and approaching things in a new way, or maybe approaching things with more gratitude. It's going to be interesting to also see these younger generations. I mean, we both taught small children, right? Or guided. I like to say I was a guide, just to facilitate their innate potential to come out and hold the space for that. So all of these smaller people now going around and going to school and looking at masks, that's interesting to me, and not really having that so much Zoom time, and also not reading facial cues, or that smiles or expressions. That's a whole nother what's the word, a whole nother kind of line of thinking, and something to look at.
Right.
Maybe it's that those kids will be more attuned to energy and frequency and vibration of another. Who knows what's going to happen there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's such an. I mean, it is such an. It's a hard time to live through, but it's such an interesting, you can't wait to see what happens next. It really is like
Yeah, right.
this like, just, you can't wait to see what's going to happen with all of this, because something's happening, we can't deny that. And not only on a spiritual kind of level, but like a social justice level and a save the earth level. All of these things are kind of happening at once, and it's an incredible time to be alive. It really.
It's there's so my daughter was looking for a bike, and also the bike shop here, there's no bikes, and there's all these people out on the trails, which is interesting. So people are definitely getting out more. Like you see
Right.
families walking down the street and communing with nature a bit more.
Right.
But there is that. When you said that, it just made me think of that, about how even if it's not, oh, now I'm becoming more spiritual, it's I mean, it's that through nature, but whatever it is for people,
Right.
getting more attuning to the natural world, connecting more with others,
Yes.
right? And being able to see that and to notice that in places, right, where
Right.
it exists. And I think the biggest thing we can do is continue to access that light in ourselves. I mean, the viewers, the audience that is here is interested and aware, right? That's why they're following you. And what a gift that is, to just walk with that awareness and to be that light that reflects that to others. Because maybe someone else recognizes a little bit of that in them, and it kind of gives them permission to tap into them. They don't feel as self-conscious, especially if people aren't surrounded by other community that's on that path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think you're so, and it reminds me of when you say that light inside. I remember I had a silent retreat that I loved to go to. It actually burned down in the fires, which was awful. It was so sad, but they're rebuilding. So I'm like, it's okay, it's okay. But I remember one being in meditation there, and they had all these candles all over the place, and some of them are there, and they're all lit. Some of them are tall and skinny, some are all melted and weird, and some are like super small. And I was looking at all these candles, and I thought, this is like us, because we have these outsides and even like the emotional stuff we carry, and all the stuff that we carry on the outside, and our personas and that kind of thing. And on the inside is this light. And that light is there for all of us, no matter what's going on outside, no matter what's happening out here. That light burns brightly in every single person, whether they're being their worst self or they're being, or they're trying to be their best self, or they've been through a lot. That light, it never goes out. That's always there. And that's the connection. That's what connects us all, every single one of us. Right?
Yes, it comes from, it's like it all comes from the same source. So if this is, it's the same light, that light is coming from the same source. If you have the sun and there are different rays of the sun, they might be I'm thinking about a sun that you would draw as a child, right?
Right.
There are these different individual rays that come out, yet they're all connected to that one sun. So they're made up of that same light and that same source. And I know for me, when all of that stuff was going on, and now, and it's so refreshing to see and to experience through breath, through meditation, through mindfulness, through shutting off the thinking brain, right? And really tuning in to be able to access that place and that light that exists within us, because that's the constant, right? That never changes. That's always there inside of us. And to be able to strengthen our connection there, so we know how to return to that place and listen from it and listen to it when things get a little wonky, like, okay, I'm home. So to allow that's one thing, is no matter how things change or or how much uncertainty there is, that's always the constant. And that's always the certainty, is that place inside of us that exists in everyone. And the practice of seeing that in another.
Right, right.
And that could be fun to just, go to the supermarket and just notice that when you look at another person, that exists in them, or to be that we're reflections of each other. Right. And to get really curious about it, and to make it kind of a fun adventure, to say, oh, I'm going to practice that. So
I have that, and I recognize it in you too. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're doing.
What it is, it's the place, of the namaste.
Right.
That's also another chapter in the book, living the namaste, right? It's, at the end of yoga class, when they say namaste, the light in me recognizes and honors the light in you, the God self, the source, divine. It's living it and being it.
Right.
Right. Not just in the 90-minute yoga class or the 20-minute yoga class, or whatever it is. And it's so interesting always to me, because in every religion and spiritual tradition, religion spurs from these spiritual traditions, and every spiritual tradition and in every religious structure, there's some form of that part and parcel, the big I and the little I, the still small light within, spark of divinity, the spark of God, whatever it is. That exists in all of it. Like, that's what it is.
Right.
So it's really living it.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, Felice, this has been so fascinating. Thank you so much. And tell people where they can find you. And by the way, I am so grateful. And I know this is like a little thing, but it isn't, because I really appreciate the fact that you keep your prices reasonable. Because I just feel like, and people have to do what they have to do. They have to make a living. They have to make a living, and no judgment there. But I do think that the people that need help and need guidance are in all socioeconomic levels. So I really appreciate that. And I know people will appreciate that. But where do they find you, and what services do you offer to people?
Thank you. So my site is groundedillumination.com.
And we'll put it in the description so people can link it.
And if people need help with children, I also have a site for that, which is
cool.
It's yourtoddlercoach.com.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I offer Reiki, I offer intuitive healing services, and I've trained in many, many years with a modality that employs science and energy work. And I do channeling and angel card readings and Akashic records, tuning into the Akashic records. Awesome. And really being available for mentorship, for guidance, for in whatever way I can support someone. I'm having a few small group programs that are in the works right now. And I do think it's really important to offer some kind of way that people have access, because it is
absolutely
different backgrounds, and spirituality isn't an exclusive kind of thing. Like, it's
right.
all want to be able to share. So, so all of the things you shared. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Felice. I feel it's such a blessing to talk to you. I'm so glad that we're able to hear your story. It's going to help so many people to, I think, kind of know that, okay, awful things don't just happen. It's like, it means something. It's telling you something. It's giving you something. It's not just an awful thing. Find the grace and the divinity in it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim. And for everyone, like, whatever happens in life, sometimes it might not be ideal, but I know for me, my life radically changed in all ways. And I can view myself as a victim of circumstance, or I could say, okay, what do I have to do? As far as what do I have to do on a daily level? Like, I took a 45-minute nap, and then I got up, and then I did stuff. I was like, oh no, I think I said I have to lie down for a little while. Okay, so the daily function, and how can we all use what we know from our experience and our wisdom, help others, and to be in service. and for the benefit of all.
Mhm.
So thank you so, so much
Exactly.
for
You're
having
welcome. You're welcome. So
me.
fun to talk to you. All
Likewise.
right, intuitive viewers, thanks so much for coming, and we'll talk to you again soon.